Welcome back to the Manage to Win podcast. Today we have Alex Medina McKelvey. It's a law firm here in Roseville, California. And don't turn off. This is not about law. This is about company culture. They have one of the strongest company cultures of any company I have ever seen. And he's going to tell you a little bit about a story. Then he's going to talk about how they really work through their values in their organization, develop their people. And they're doing powerful things as peacemakers, living out their purpose. And there's things here for everyone to sharpen your axe and do better at that tree that you're trying to chop down. Let's dive in. Good conversation. You're going to gain a lot. Alex, it is great to have you on the show. Actually, I can't even remember the last time we met in person, even though you're, like 10, 15 minutes away from where I am. But just for the audience, I invited Alex to come on the show because his company, Medina McKelvey, is an amazing law firm here locally in our area. I'm not typically a fan of lawyers, although these guys are awesome and been growing a great company, but they have an amazing company culture. And I asked Alex on if he would just share some tidbits about that. Maybe a starting point, Alex, is just, how did you and Brandon get together and decide to start this thing in the first place? And when was that?
Yeah. Hey, David, good to see you. And appreciate you having me on here. It is kind of interesting. I always joke with people, nobody likes meeting me, especially for the first time, because usually I'm meeting people kind of on their worst day. But I've been a lawyer for 23 years. I don't think I can say this for much longer, but I'm not as young as I look. Been practicing law for a long time. I started my law firm with my business partner and now best friend, Brandon McKelvey, back in April of 2013. And before that, I was practicing at a big international law firm, actually kind of the biggest law firm in the world, was doing very well. We can kind of get to it if you want, David, kind of, my backstory, how, kind of what led me to that point, kind of an interesting journey. But one of the things that is kind of universal for folks who are practicing in these big international corporate law firms is you kind of have to make a choice. You can be a really, really, really good lawyer, or you can be a great husband and a great dad. But if anybody tells you that you can do both, they are lying, just flat out. You cannot be both. And so I like to say that when I was working at the big firm, downtown Sacramento, that I was a no dad and I was a no husband. And by that, I mean, the questions were, can you go to this? Can you help with this? Can you be at this? And the answer was almost always no. So I would leave the house before the sun came up, and I would come home after the sun came down. I had 2 kids, 2 boys at the time. I would barely see them. That was basically my life. I was killing it in my career, doing all the right things in terms of a legal perspective, but personally was really kind of struggling. Brandon was in the same kind of boat with his family and with his situation. Career was going like this. Personal life was going like this, there really was no meeting in the middle, if you know what I mean.
So for you individually, Alex,
yeah,
who did the wake-up call? Was it your wife who said something? Was it your kids said something? Or did you just kind of wake up one night in a sweater or whatever it might be, and you just suddenly said, how did you realize, wait a minute, this isn't where I want to be in 20 years or whatever time frame?
Yeah, well, you asked me the question, so I got to be honest with you. I believe it was kind of God that kind of gave me the wake-up call. So for me, in my life, I've always been a high achiever. I don't mean this to sound the way it might sound, but everything I've done, I've always done well. I've just been a high achiever. I've just done well in school. I was the kid that you might have made fun of, but then you tried to copy my papers in school. But I was the 4-point everything and captain of everything, president of everything, all the way through school. Like my nickname, even when I was a first-year associate at my first law firm, was the Golden Boy. Literally everything I did well. So when I was at the big firm, I remember getting a call. I think it was like 3 days before Christmas. I got a call from the partner that I was working with, and I was working a ton of hours, by the way. But compared to the culture at that firm, it wasn't quite enough. The partner I worked for kind of protected me because he had 4 kids. And so I was only working about 2,000 billable hours a year. I don't remember exactly what it was. It was a ton. It was not only that, but we had marketing responsibilities and all that other kind of stuff. And like I said, I was still barely seeing my family. But so he calls me up. He goes, Alex, I don't know how to tell you this. You've been killing it, but the firm says you need to bill more. It's like more bricks, less straw, right? And so they're putting you on probation and they're cutting your pay significantly. But the good news is I could probably get your pay back, but you're going to have to work more if you want to keep your job. They're putting you on probation for a year. That was really like the worst professional news I've ever had. And it was kind of rocked my world. So that was kind of the wake up call for me. And it was a reminder to me that my worth is way, way more than what I do for a living or what somebody else says about me. And it was a reminder that I was making work what I would call an idol. So yeah, my wife and I, we kind of did a lot of soul searching. A lot of prayer was what I do in my life, and talked to a lot of folks. And at that point in my life, I did not think that I was a business guy or an entrepreneur. Actually, up to that point in my life, I had never even brought in my own client. I had never spoken. I'd never been on podcasts. I'd never done public speaking. I didn't think I was good at business development. I thought I was a sport guy. If you know anything about the DISC profile, we do a lot of that at my firm, which we can get into if we have time. I thought I was something called a C. I thought I was conscientious and support, because that was my role. My role was to make other people look good, write briefs, give them to other people, let them take the credit. I now know that I'm an ID, which is completely the opposite of a C. So I really felt that I was being called to quit this big law firm, tell them thank you, but no thank you, and to start my own law firm. And I wanted to go from being a no dad and a no husband to a yes dad and a yes husband. And that's really how Medina McKelvey was started.
That's interesting. Now, don't let me cross any lines here that I shouldn't cross, Alex, but I know your faith is amazingly powerful in your life. You were the ultimate achiever through all this time, and then you're knocking out of the park. I mean, your stats, if you're playing baseball or whatever it might be, were incredible stats, and then your company says, not good enough. You got to do more. Speaking about your faith, I'm curious, and we share the same faith. Anybody in the audience doesn't realize that. So followers of Jesus. But when you went through this epiphany and then the years after, I got two questions. One is, did it awaken you to anything that happened earlier in your life that made you that ultimate achiever, where a lot of your fulfillment was in being the best, being the golden child, and not, by the way, not just named the golden child or thought of as the golden child, but you actually were bringing it in. You actually were crossing the finish line first. So did anything get revealed to you on why you were so driven?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll try to keep it brief, but we lawyers, we think we're smarter than everybody, so we talk way too much. And no exception.
Don't worry about it. This podcast is meant for talking.
Yeah, I'll kind of have to tell you part of my story. I think this will be helpful for people, because one of the things I've really been kind of diving into is this concept of our identity and our purpose. And it's different from our vocation. Our vocation is what we do. Our identity is who we are. And a lot of people, they derive their identity from what they do. And I think it should be the opposite. Is you figure out what your identity is, and then if you're living out your true identity, it informs your vocation. And so for me, just through my upbringing and my background, my dad emigrated here from the Philippines when he was young and broke. And so, from the Philippines, Asian American culture, achieve, be perfect, education, all that kind of stuff, right? And then my mom, she grew up in a poor background, escaped poverty, married my dad at a young age, and they didn't have a lot. So same type of thing from both sides, achieve, education, that's the message at home, be perfect, all that kind of stuff. So that's drilled into me at a young age. That's number one. And number two, I just had God-given talent. I just happened to be born, I process things very quickly, smart, naturally ambitious, all those types of things. But I didn't have faith. I had a form of faith, but I didn't have a relationship with Jesus. And so I had this achievement mindset, both with success as well as my understanding of who God was. So everything was achievement based my entire life. And when I kind of went through school and through high school and college, you really only have, this is a joke, of course, but when you grow up as a firstborn Asian American, you got like 5 career paths. It's like accountant, lawyer, doctor, nurse, CPA, right? So I wasn't smart enough to get into medical school, so I went to law school, that kind of thing. So, but then tragedy struck in my life, And I was going to law school for me. I wanted to make money. We didn't grow up with a lot. I wanted success. I wanted a name for myself, all those sorts of things. And I was living one way. I was living the way the world would live. You can fill in the blanks of what that would look like. But then my third year of law school, about a month or two before I was set to graduate, I was actually dating somebody, was engaged to be married to somebody different than who is my current wife of 21 years. And we now have 4 boys together, by the way. My dad got sick. He had a stomach ache, went to the hospital, and 20 days later, he died of undiagnosed colon cancer. Completely rocked my world and shook everything. Had to take a leave of absence from law school, all that other kind of stuff. My little sister was 15 at the time. My mom was still in her 40s and shook everything. But through that process, my best friend that I had grown up with, we just grew up together. We were best friends. We were 2 months apart. When we grew up together, when I went one way in life, when we got to high school and college, he went the other way. He did things called InterVarsity and Campus Crusade, and he made all these right choices. I made all the left choices. I went to Berkeley. That's a left choice, if you get the joke. So he was the kind of guy who was walking alongside me through that process. And I'm making this long story even longer. He introduced me to Jesus. So I became a believer. And so when I became a believer, all of my priorities completely changed. All the reasons I wanted to be a lawyer and, become a lawyer to completely change. It wasn't about money and success and power anymore. And so I thought, oh my goodness, what do I do? I had this crisis in identity, right? I'm talking about identity. I thought I shouldn't be a lawyer anymore. But because I was a good Asian, what was the solution? More education. So I enrolled at Fuller Seminary at night, and I was working at an international law firm in downtown Los Angeles by day, billing 2,100 hours a year, going to seminary at night. By the way, when I became a Christian, I told my fiance at the time, she goes, you got weird, gave me my ring back. She dumps me. So I'm dating my then girlfriend, who's now my wife of 21 years. So I'm exhausted. I'm not sleeping. I'm stressed out, first or second year lawyer, also going to seminary. So I remember I'm walking around the LA Coliseum. USC is playing Cal, my alma mater. USC is winning, of course. And I'm telling Jeremy, this is the guy who led me to the Lord. And I said, hey, I'm drowning right now. I said, I think I'm going to quit my job because I'm in seminary and I'm going to become a full-time pastor or missionary, because I think that's what you're supposed to do. I'm a Christian. My purpose of going to law school has changed. So that's what I'm going to do. And I'll never forget it. He says to me, Alex, the church has plenty of pastors and missionaries. We don't have many lawyers. And that is the answer to your question, which I'll get to in a minute, David, which is I believe that was kind of the call of part of my identity, which is to be a kingdom lawyer. So I actually dropped out of seminary and decided if I'm going to impact the kingdom, I need to first learn how to be a good lawyer. So I dedicated myself, and we used your baseball analogy. You can't just go out and change the world when you're a first year lawyer. You just got to learn how to take your licks. You got to get your at-bats. I didn't know how to, not only did I not know how to hit a curveball, I couldn't hit a fastball, slider, sweeper, splinker, cutter, anything. I didn't even know how to stand in the box. I didn't even know where the dugout was, the visitors clubhouse was, or anything. I had to learn how to be a good lawyer first. So that took me 13 years before God put me in a position where I could start my own law firm, where I could create a culture where we could impact the community and the world.
Wow, interesting. I'm struck by 2 things. One, I was listening to a podcast, I think it's called Good Soil. It's an offshoot of a guy you would know, John Eldridge. And the guy was interviewing someone who was talking about, being a man. And he said his daughter had reached the stage where she was interviewing with colleges about going and playing, I think it was lacrosse. And he said a couple things, but one thing really strikes with what you're saying about your story there is they met with one coach, and the coach said, I hope I'm getting this right, but the coach was talking about things, and the coach said, okay, well, our purpose on our team is this. Our goal is this. 2 different things. And she said, and one thing, we never get the 2 confused. And I think the purpose was, we're going to raise up women who are strong, intelligent, wise, good people. That's the purpose. And our goal is to win championships.
And so,
but we never sacrifice the purpose in pursuit of the goal. And it sounds like that's part of what you went through, if I heard you right.
Yep. That's
Okay.
right. That's right.
Okay. Interesting. And then it's also interesting that you were brought to your faith by your best friend. The best man at my wedding of my first marriage, actually, had issues in life. Great guy, Smitty. And I got married when I was 20, and he committed suicide a couple of years later. At the rosary, my other best friend, Jack, was praying while I was sobbing. And long story short, he brought me to Christ.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So similar thing. Very, very interesting. So, but you've still got a lot of things that you're unwrapping. So you were overworking at the big firm. So you get hit with a 2x4 across the forehead, proverbial, where it's like, this isn't going to work. The math doesn't work. You didn't use that term, but
right.
Building 2,000 hours, and that's not enough. Whereas that's full time. And by the way, for the audience, I think most of our audience understands this, but there might be a few of you. Most people work 2,000 hours a year. And so you're thinking, oh yeah, Alex can build 2,000 hours. Well, no, that's not it. So what percentage of your work hours is actually billable when you were an attorney at that big firm? Because if you're billing 2,000, my feeling is you were working way beyond that.
Way beyond that, because not all of your time is billed. And even if it's billed, it's not all captured. And then you have other responsibilities like marketing and firm meetings. And then there's the commute time and all that other kind of stuff. And so, it's usually a 55-hour week just on average, but then you get last minute motions and weekend work, and you're just expected to be on call at all times. But even beyond that, to kind of get back to this identity and purpose piece, I was not living out my true identity. I was not a C, and I was being forced to live out a different purpose. And it was really interesting because I'm naturally a people person. I'm naturally a D. I'm good at marketing and sales and business development and being influential and public speaking, all these types of things. It just gives me great joy. And so one of the things that was happening to me, being forced into this role where I had to be very quiet, very measured. I didn't speak up. It was like, only speak as spoken to. I had a lot of anxiety. I actually had clinical anxiety. I was in therapy. I was taking medication. I had a hard time sleeping. I had insomnia, all these types of things. I didn't know why. But in my personal life, I had this dichotomy. People who knew me, they would say the word that was usually used to describe me was very passionate. So I had all these hobbies. I would collect all these things because I had to have an outlet because I'm an I, right? Like I'm getting right now. I feel like Steph Curry in the zone. Like when he just feels like he can, or like, you get in the sweet spot at any sport. I'm also a competitive tennis player. I know how that feels like when I feel like I can't miss. I know I'm going to beat you. There is a time when I know if I just see it, I'm going to ace you. I don't care how good you are. You get in the zone, right? I'm almost starting to feel it right now, David. So I had to have that outlet, and I didn't know it at the time, but I just knew, why am I stressed all the time? Because I wasn't living out my purpose and my identity. And it was to be a kingdom lawyer, I'll use your example. So my purpose was to be a peacemaker. The vehicle was to run an employment law firm. And so that's when Brandon and I got together and we said, hey, you want to start a law firm together for the glory of God? Let's do this.
So that's like totally different. By the way, you don't do this, but I hate the lawyer billboards, all the injury lawyers and stuff, but let's not go down that route. So when you talk about a law firm for God, and I want to encourage the audience, this is not meant to be promoting Jesus except by our behaviors, by the way. We want to behave consistently that way, but you can believe in anything. You think of Patagonia, they believed in nature and what they were doing out there. And there's a lot of different people who've gone out after a purpose. And that's what we're really talking about here. But Alex, really, you've done an amazing job. How did you and Brandon, we could talk about how you get together, but with limited time, really. So when you guys got together, how did you start to define, what does it mean to have a law firm for God? Because a lot of people say that, but there's not much there. It's a struggle for them. I'm not putting them down. And I've had trouble doing that. I've tried to live out my faith in work, and at times I've done it well, and at times I've done it really poorly.
Yep. It's so we're humans.
That's right.
And humans are a mess.
Yeah, that's right. So when you guys thought about it, how did you really kind of zero in on, what are the attributes? What's going to make this something that lives out our faith fully. It's not where somebody's going to hear that, oh, those guys, are trying to serve God, but look at what they're doing here, and they can pick us apart really easy.
Right. No, it's a great question. It's a hard one. Like I said, people are messy and all that kind of stuff. First of all, we're not an overtly Christian law firm. If you go to my website, you're not going to see John 3:16. You're not going to see a hidden fish. You're not going to cross your eyes and look sideways and see a cross somewhere. And we don't even talk about it internally. It's just part of our value system. And that's really kind of the key. What we said was our firm is going to be built on these priorities. It's faith, family, work. And so internally, that's how we built it. And we would call ourselves a purpose-driven brand. And we actually went through a journey with a marketing company called Purpose Driven Brands, but we had to figure out, what are those core values? And so we really went through a journey as a law firm together. And there's two things. We had to figure out what's our product, and we have to be excellent at it. You have to be excellent. It's great if you have values and you have an awesome mission, value, purpose statement, MVP, as we call it. We always say the mission is the boss. I'm not the boss. Brand is not the boss. The mission is the boss. It's great if you have an awesome mission, but if your product is terrible or your service is terrible, it does nobody any good. It's like those people who say, oh, God's going to provide for me. Well, have you gone out and looked for a job today? Well, no. Well, then, he wasn't working with us. We got to be smart about it. So there was kind of two pieces to that. So we had to figure out what we really felt like was our calling in that. And it comes down to one word, and it's peacemaking. And when we met with some business coaches and advisors, they said, I don't think that's right for you. You guys are litigators. And a litigator is somebody, we go to court, we deal with disputes. We said, no, that's absolutely the right word. The world needs more of that. How can we do that in a way that honors God, honors our families, honors our enemies? And there's a way to do it differently. And so we had to go through a really, really long journey of finding out, is there a way to litigate differently that differentiates ourselves in the market? So we'll talk about what those values are, because we just kind of did a rebrand of what our main 5 values are. But then what's our product? How are we going to be excellent? How are we going to be better than everybody else? And here's the thing. When I was unshackled from the big firm and started to realize I had latent, hidden talents that were put into my DNA from my creator from birth, that it wasn't just about these other passions, baseball and fiction and all these other things that people say, Alex is so passionate, and they get to work and I'm like this quiet little mouse. It all started to come out, right? So we started to figure out, Brandon and I were entrepreneurs, we're visionaries, we're creative, we're good at business. So we said, we can do something different than any other law firm in this state. And even though there was only 2 of us at the time, we had a vision of what we could do. And we're just getting started. But with baseball, it's like we've grown so much. We're up to close to 50 people now, and we're literally without sounding whatever, one of the leading wage and hour and employment law firms in the state of California. We're up and down the state. We've got clients. And Brandon is now a full-time mediator. He's one of the top 2, if not maybe the best mediator in the state of California. We figured out how to create a system that helps employers. We said, that's our product. We are going to help employers in the state of California navigate the mess. That is, we defined the problem. California's legal system creates tension between employers and employees, and we have the solution. So we can help prevent lawsuits before they happen. If you're in a lawsuit, we can help you get out of it, and we can help your culture to make it so that you're not going to get sued again. And once we figured that out, we were then able to add additional services, additional personnel. All the while, the overarching goal is peacemaking, which is hard to define. We were being able to bring peace internally, externally to our clients, and even in the way that we deal with our enemies. Not overt. We're not saying, like I said, there's no Bible verses, but we're living out those faith values in a way that's attractive to everybody. And it's been amazing because people want to work here because they see that there's something different about us.
Oh, yeah. And full disclosure to the audience, my son, Jeff, went to work as an employee after doing contract work for you, I think in January of this year. So talk about those values. And I think, we could spend a whole podcast talking about the peacemaking, but the concept is that if I heard you correctly, you started in 2013, April 2013?
Correct.
And now we are approximately 12 years past that, almost exactly. And here you are, went from 2 to 50 people and very strong, have a very strong pipeline of business. You haven't mentioned that, but that's my understanding. And it's stayed that way. And people are attracted in this very toxic environment of the world. You guys are living out the peacemaker side, and Brandon actually formed a separate group on this whole mediation piece. And what an opportunity to do that well. I talk a lot about good cop leadership, or good cop, bad cop negotiation. But I always say, everybody can be the good cop, but the boundaries have to be firm. And the reason I bring that up is, and the boundaries are usually not a person, policy, law, doing what's right, values, whatever it might be, time frame. But you talked about even treating your enemies well. Can you give us some examples of how that works in real life in your work?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll correct you really quick because I just remembered it's actually April 2014. So we just are about to celebrate our 11th anniversary.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's a mindset. First of all, I try not to think of our opposing lawyers as the enemy. I think sometimes the state of California and the laws sometimes as the enemy. And even that, it is what it is. Because they're folks who are doing their job, just like I'm doing my job. And it's employment law. It's not criminal law. Somebody's not going to jail. I recognize that the folks that I'm representing as business owners, as a business owner myself, I have a tremendous amount of compassion for them. It's one of my callings in life is to serve businesses and business owners. My dad was a small business owner, by the way. He started his own business. It didn't do well. I saw what that did to my family. So it gives me even more compassion to serve them. And so sometimes it's hard when I'm dealing with somebody who's representing somebody who's trying to take down a small business owner. So it's an act of discipline, right? To say, I love my enemies and bless those who persecute. But it's just like any other discipline or any other habit. The more that you practice it, the better you get at it. It's like exercise. Like if you've never done a push-up before, the first one's going to be awful, but if you do them every single day, before long, you can do 100 of them without even thinking about it. So, in terms of examples, I remember one time, one of the most aggressive plaintiffs lawyers in the state of California who brings what are called class action and PAGA lawsuits, which are really the scourge of California businesses. There's these ticky-tack lawsuits for meal and rest break violations that can be millions of dollars for almost any business. They're just crazy. So one of the things that we did, we said, hey, we're peacemakers. You got it. The mission is the boss. I can tell you our 5 actual values if you want. But if that's the boss, we said, this guy is killing businesses in California. Everybody hates this guy. What would a peacemaker do? Well, we would sit down with this guy and we'd get to know him and we would find out what makes him tick. Is he really a bad guy? Well, how much does a plane ticket cost? Like to go to Burbank and take a guy out to dinner? Like not that much. Like it's not that hard. So we asked him if he wanted to go out to dinner. And he was so surprised that anybody would even want to do that, first of all. So it was me, Brandon, one of our partners, and we flew down to LA and we took him out to a nice dinner at the Jean George Steakhouse at some fancy hotel. And we had an absolute blast with this guy. And that was years ago. And it's paid dividends to this day. Not only because we get good settlements with him, but just I would call this guy a friend. And I understand him now. And I understand some of the tactics he makes. He's doing it because he's got an act to play. He's doing a job. He's representing his clients. He's a human being, just like us. And when you understand somebody, that leads to empathy and that leads to compassion and it prevents you from demonizing. I've had calls too with other opposing lawyers where, we'll just start talking. I always like to ask personal questions. And a woman, a few months ago, she shared with me that she had immigrated here from Poland and that her dad had Alzheimer's and she started crying and said that she was going to go visit him. And she was afraid that when she saw him, that he wouldn't recognize her, wouldn't even know her name. And I felt super bold in the moment. And sorry, I know this is not like a Christianity podcast, but this is just what happened. This is the example that came to mind. I prayed for her. I told her, you know what? I really believe that God is telling me that when you get to Poland, he's going to recognize you and he's going to know your name. So you don't need to worry because God created him and God created you and he loves you both. And I want you to know that he's going to recognize you. And that's not me, by the way. I didn't grow up in I just had that sense of confidence that she needed that encouragement in that moment. She's weeping. I'm weeping. My associate is watching this and he's weeping. He texts me. He goes, that's one of the most amazing things I've ever experienced at work in my entire life.
Yeah.
Fast forward She emails me. She goes, Alex, I just want you to know, I got to Poland and I walked into the room. My dad recognized me by name. Like, what? Like, that's right there, validation of everything of what we've ever done.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if I treated it like an enemy, and she was an enemy, because by the way, the case she brought was completely ridiculous. But also, but to put it on the practical side, I was able to settle that case for honestly like a bargain basement price because we were able to break through on a personal level.
Well, and it one thing I've found is that I have to remind myself, which I'm just putting what you said in different words, slightly different words, is that everybody's doing the best they can and everybody's got wounds, and those wounds affect how they process information, which then results in opinions and decisions and behaviors. But they're trying.
Yep.
They're actually trying based on what they think is right or what should be their priorities. And they need some grace. They just need, and treating them like a human. I can't imagine, is there ever been a time where you treated someone like a human? Well, like a human, I don't even know whether that's a good phrase, but you treated someone nicely with grace. You loved on them, as some people would say appropriately, and didn't work out for whatever reason, or didn't work out the way you wanted. You ever regretted it, even one time?
I don't regret it. There's one lawyer I'm thinking of. It's still not working. He's a hard one, but it's going to work. I'm still trying with him. He's very
Yeah, but at the end of the day, you think of how you use your sports analogies.
Yeah.
You still went out and you left it all on the field.
Yep.
And if it didn't work, it didn't work.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So talk to me about your values.
Yeah.
And then talk to me about the inside the firm a little bit, things that you do differently that demonstrate this peacemaker, or I would even say almost if you're a peacemaker, you're a servant's heart.
Yeah. Peacemaking is hard because it's, a lot of people think of peacemaking as very weak. But I actually think that when you're exercising restraint, it's probably one of the hardest things to do. And it's a demonstration of the biggest type of strength that you can possibly have. Like the exercising of restraint, I mean, you really think about it, exercising of self-control is maybe the hardest thing you have to do. But we did find that being an employment law firm where we do everything, including litigating, that if we said we're peacemakers externally, nobody would ever hire us. I mean, really, because you can't bring in a client and say, hey, we're going to roll over and settle. Like, you got to get them there first. And even internally, we had a hard time with that. So one of the things we just did, we wanted to really kind of distill that mission down into, 5 core values that I think that our people would understand a little bit better. And so we really think that these are the 5 values that really drive us. And so I'll say them first. We can unpack them if you want or if we have time. But number 1, it's people first. And these are internal and external. It's people first. We're generous. We're highly engaged. We're excellence focused. And we're resilient. And under those, we have some short statements that talk about things that are both externally facing and internally facing. And we have measurables for those. Every one of our one-to-ones, we always measure. How are you doing? Where are some ways that you've been people first? Where are some ways that you haven't been? Let's encourage you on that. I'm the same way. As a D, you know the DISC very well because we consult with you. When we onboard somebody, we have to go, Ds have to really work on this because I want to get everything done now. And when Ds are not healthy, they leave people in their wake. They leave a trail of bodies. So I'm always people last. So I have to really work on this one. How have we been generous? And what's really cool about the generous one, I'll just tell you what it is. We give a lot of money. It's to certain causes. Actually, every mediation that Brandon does, 10% right off the top goes to an organization that rescues girls from sex trafficking in Cambodia and in Belize. We support so many other organizations. That's part of our DNA. One of the things we said is we're going to donate off the top of our profits every single year until we're not able to anymore. We just increase every single year. It's so much fun. But when we say we're generous, we say, and these are aspirational for our people. We have all these written down. You proactively invest your time, knowledge, and resources with colleagues, clients, and the community. You give grace to others, promote positive relationships, and foster trust. You go above and beyond in demonstrating a serpent-hearted approach. So when we talk about generous, it's also having almost like you assume the best about other people. It's not just generosity with money, but it's with time and our spirit about people. So it's really neat. So we engage with people, we discipline, we encourage. It all comes back to the 5 values. But if you at the core, that's peacemaking.
Yeah. No, you have the concept that you give off the top as you're going. A lot of people give off the back end. If we have extra money, we'll do something, or off of the profit margin. Okay. But you're building your numbers and you're being good stewards of those numbers. So you're making certain you're billing at the right amount and you can afford to do this piece. I was listening to a podcast. I want to get him on of another guy who believes in conscious capitalism. And he's running an MSP, an IT MSP, managed service provider in Southern California. And he talked about how they are very consistent about their money. He didn't mention anything about faith, but for him, what was important was the conscious capitalism and being very careful. He said that if we shut down and we had no earnings at all, he said, I have enough set aside in the bank. I can pay all our existing employees. We don't have to let go of anyone for 4.5 years. And they have like 200 employees.
That's cool.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's what drives him, different type of purpose. Yeah. Now, you guys do something very interesting with your people, if it's okay if I mention it. Sure. But like with your health insurance, you have a very good health insurance plan, but then you guys also step up and, every plan has a deductible and your plan has a certain amount, but you guys, if I understand it correctly, step in and you say, okay, well, we cover the deductible. So you won't have to pay for it.
That's awesome. We're doing a disc training live. This is a D for you. I don't know the details, but that sounds like something that I would approve. Well, I'm pointing out the value of generous right there. It sounds like something I would approve.
Well, it is. And also, it also says something else that it reinforces people first.
Right.
Because it requires you not only to make a big investment of time when you hire someone, but you also have a big investment of the cash. Not that you're covering that reserve. It goes in some type of government-approved tax thing. Okay. And then if the funds aren't used, you can kind of roll it out and move it into something the next year or something like that. But to say to someone, if you're at this earning level, I think your higher level people have to contribute something. But if you're at this level, we don't want you to have that burden. We want you to get the health care that you need, the dental, the vision, and it demonstrates it through action. And I know in some areas, I don't want to bring them all up, but I know in some areas, you and Brandon just really live this out. That doesn't mean you're walking around handing anybody cash all the time. That's not the same thing, right? That's not good stewardship.
Right.
But you're being very fair. And you guys also do your best to, and you mentioned this, hold people accountable. So you're doing those check-ins and confirming how you're doing, but you're also confirming the metrics that they're achieving. And if they're not achieving in some way, you're going alongside them. You're training your leaders to go alongside them so they know how to do that and hold them within their lanes. You got to stay here. And if you're not, then we have to work on that. Am I correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. Like I said before, the mission's always the boss. We tie it to the values. But the thing that's really cool, you can go back to it and we can say, look, how have you been highly engaged or where have you not been? And let's work with you on certain ways. But because we're people first and generous, if somebody makes a really, really, really big mistake, it's like, well, let's learn from it. Are you ever going to do something that bad again? Why would we fire you? Right? Unless it's like embezzling money or something like that. So that's been really cool for us too. And I think another thing that would really set us apart is, in addition to providing coaching and all the other kind of culture stuff we do, we are really, really, really big on helping people to understand themselves. I think self-awareness is huge. That's one of the reasons we use you on the disc. We do so many trainings. Emotional intelligence, I know, is hot in the corporate community. We are very, very big on that. And so many folks come in. I just know how much it's helped me in my own life, kind of understanding what it means to be a DI. But even that, even the disc, I feel like the disc is like the training wheels. It's the detailed reports. How do you communicate? What are your primary motivating factors? What are the things that trigger you? What are the things that energize you? What are the things that deplete you? Who are the types of people that really, really, you have to work extra hard? EGI is extra grace, or EGR is extra grace required, all that kind of stuff. And then we work with our people. We train them until they understand that so they can recognize other people internally and externally. We try to build teams so that we have a D, I, S, and C on each team. We train them to recognize it in clients. We even do something called SCARF training. That's an acronym for the 5 emotional triggers. So we can recognize with our clients, what's this lawsuit? It's going to trigger something. Is it status or ego? Is it certainty? Is it autonomy? Is it their relational piece? Or is it fairness and justice? That's a SCARF. I won't go into that now. But we're very, very big on training our people to know themselves and to see and assess others' emotional needs and to be able to relate to them. Because if you're self-aware and if you're other-aware and if you're aware of other people's values, oftentimes you can stop a conflict before it starts, or if there is a conflict, then you can resolve it in a more peaceful way. And what is that at its core? That's peacemaking.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. And I want the audience to hear a couple things here. One is how often Medina McKelvey goes back to your values and your mission with your people. It's not just on the wall. It's not like Enron in bronze on a plaque outside their corporate offices. You guys are going back to it, engaging on it, so it's real. And I also want the audience to hear that you're spending a lot of time training people. And I don't mean go watch this video. You're interacting, there's people mentoring, coaching, where you're teaching them. And I totally agree with you. If somebody understands themselves better and is open to that, they also have to be open to it. Otherwise, they're really not going to understand it, no matter how much you teach them about it. They're open to it. They're going to receive that, and they want to. And they work on strengths, building their strengths. They might work on some areas that need some improvement also, but it really changes. I agree with you. I agree.
It creates a great paradigm when you have to correct and discipline and mentor too, because you've already had those discussions, and it's like, hey, remember when we were talking about the fact that sometimes you have a hard time speaking up, and so we're really working with you on that. And that's why in meetings we'll say, hey, is there anything else that we didn't cover that you wanted to cover? That's for the S's of the world, right? Hey, oftentimes, kind of hold stuff back. So it's really great for an accountability platform as well. But I'll even give you an example. I mean, because we have these values, because we have kind of the people first, the accountability. I had one today, right before we got on camera today. I had to apologize to somebody. I was in a one-to-one. I had made a flippant comment because I'm a D, I'm moving 100 miles an hour. I had said something that I knew offended one of my people. And so I had to be a peacemaker and I had to apologize. And how do you apologize? You have to apologize directly. You have to apologize sincerely. You have to look them in the eye. You have to ask for forgiveness. And sometimes it's hard. And I did it. And she said, thank you. It happened a couple of weeks ago and I wanted to do it in person. She said, that really hurt my feelings, but I appreciate you telling me directly. And we were able to clear the air. And so we've got all these great values. We do all these great things and I still totally screwed it up. Right. But that's having that type of culture where we are able to admit our mistakes, hold each other accountable. Like I'm the big boss, right? My name's on the door. I still hurt somebody's feelings, but she was able to forgive me because we have that type of culture.
Yeah. And I think that's huge. So, in everything I do, I always say, as a matter of fact, I was just writing about what we call our 3T process, where you teach to transfer knowledge, you test to confirm they can apply what they learned, and then you train or mentor on an ongoing basis till they achieve mastery. Mm-hmm. But mastery doesn't mean flawlessness.
Right.
Yeah, we're human. So, and you are working very diligently to create a safe environment, and then being open enough that when you make a mistake, you're demonstrating that, you have to apologize at times too. You have to own certain stuff too. And I think that's great, Alex. So, we could keep going and I hope you can fit me in for a lunch sometime soon, because I sure would love to catch up with you and Brandon. Maybe when Jeff's up next time he comes out.
Let's do it.
But I just really appreciate all that you're doing. I sincerely do. I hope that, and pray that you continue to grow. I hope you continue to grow personally and as that dad and husband that you are striving to be, which I know is a number one, number two priority, maybe after your faith.
Yeah.
And that's an ongoing journey too. But I just wish you the best. Anything you want to let the audience know? I know your website's medinamckelvey.com, right? And Anything you want to say about your company before we sign off, or advice?
This is not a plug. I would just say, if you're a business owner, really find out. I say this to my employees too, all the time. You can find out what we do. This is not a plug for the business. What I would say for you personally, whoever is watching or listening, a good key to figure out your core identity and your core purpose is to think about the things that so energize you in your life, whatever sphere of life, that when you do them, you don't even realize that time is passing, and you don't get tired, you don't get fatigued, you don't need to eat, you don't need to go to the bathroom, like all those things. Chances are you have untapped something that is part of your identity and your purpose, and you might not even realize it. And it's funny because I think I was kind of alluding to this earlier. I had never brought in a client when I started this firm. I had never done any speaking. I had never done any business development. Now I'm head of business development for the firm. I bring in nearly every wage and hour client we have. I speak all the time. I used to be terrified of it. Now I look forward to it. And if I hadn't taken a leap of faith to start this firm, I never would have known that these are some of my greatest gifts and talents. And I never would have known that it would be, aside from my faith and my family, like the most fulfilling thing that I do in my life. I look forward to this kind of stuff. It energizes me. And so for all of you who are listening to this, there might be, and that happened to me in my late 30s. I'm 40, I'll be 48 in a couple months. You don't know how many decades, you might have part of your story that's not even been written yet. And so explore that part of you. And if you feel like you're doing something that you might even be good at, like I was very good at my old law firm, at writing briefs and being the support. Extremely good. One of the best, like truly one of the best in the state of California, but it was killing my soul. I was exhausted. I was anxious. I'm not anxious anymore, by the way, because I'm living out my purpose and my identity. So if you find that you're doing something that you're truly excellent at, but you're feeling depleted and you're not energized, maybe you're not living out your purpose and your identity. I'm not saying sell your business unless Mark Cuban wants to buy it, but explore those things because there might be part of your story that's not written yet.
Hey, that's awesome.
Yep.
Thank you, Alex.
Yep. Thank you.
Really appreciate it.